We learn to love in that we fall in love and, well, we experience love from parents and so on. But we are limited, and our resources spread among all the people we meet in life. Well, depends what we mean by meet, but I mean there's an awful lot of people that come within range. We could hardly love them all. Not in the way that we fall in love. And nor could you, I might point out, because they will not have your values. In other words, what you value, they in some measure do not value. And therefore, you can be concerned for such, but you can't enjoy the values that they have that are contrary to your own. And so you come to realize that if you are to have a satisfying love, it has to be with your God, by which I mean the personification of your values. Now you might say, oh, this is myself. Yes, but it's not the I. It's what you find to be your true values at heart. Not the persona that you are projecting and the roles you are playing in living, but the values that you truly have, which are distinct in many ways from the values of your society, though related to them, influenced by them, yes. And what you need to do is find out if your true values are to be your true values, your true identity, not just your projected persona. And it's hard to do that if you spend your time, if you like, worshipping other gods. You know, the god of the religion of your culture and country you live in, say, or subgroup that you belong to. Or what's imposed on you in some way. You need to love your view of God, what you value in your God, what you understand your God must be like, else there's no way you could value him. And when you, if you like, devote yourself to your God before all else, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, then you come to find out whether you do truly value this sort of God or not. And you shift your values accordingly, according to your experience of the outcome of the values you have been practicing. You change. You're learning. But this is not a sort of head knowledge. This is not, well, it's not that. It's your values are being molded by your experience. And if you don't have experience in loving your God, well, you can't perfect your view of God. It remains dormant whilst you are forced to practice something that you don't truly value, only in part. And that might be it might be, for instance, it could be a very dominant notion of God, or it could be an absence of God, as in the secular world, which has really only come about in large measure in 20th century and 21st century. There were always traces of it, especially among the very powerful, who seemed to be amoral, and among the incredibly poor and deprived, who seemed to be deprived of, in fact, well, the deprived meant deprived of the presence of God. They weren't taught truly about God. I mean, even the God of their religion, their culture, they had just survived just by just. So God didn't major in their lives either. But the bulk of people, of course, did accept some view of God, albeit the God of their culture at the time. Now you need to worship your God so that you develop such and find out such and use your resources accordingly. And according to the Jesus teaching, you should love your neighbour as yourself, and your neighbour is defined by Jesus as the one like the one who was rescued by the Good Samaritan. He should love the Samaritan because the Samaritan rescued him. He'd have died otherwise. And indeed, it's our natural response if someone rescues us. Well, my goodness, what sort of person are you if you don't love them? But you don't love them with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. You love them as yourself. And yourself is, remember, purposed on loving your God. So, you would like that they come to love your God, but they may resist this. It's one thing to help you and pick you up from the dying from the edge of the road, but it's another thing to take on your God. He has his own God to worship. So we're not surprised if the Good Samaritan doesn't take on your religion. But we are clear we are to love him as ourselves and want him to. By your religion, I mean your God, not the religion that may have been forced on you by your culture. I'll just pause a minute. Yes, now what I mean is then that you can, at heart, only love what you truly value. And in a sense, what you truly value is this is your true self. But it's not the selfishness of I, not that persona you're projecting or forced to project in your society, your position and roles and so on. It is ideally in the Jesus teaching a situation where you understand your God to be your heavenly dad. Perfect, complete, in particular, possibly the omni, all-powerful and all-loving. But that may not be your God. Maybe that may not be your view of God, in which case you still need to love your God to find out if this is truly best for you. Is this truly your values? Or do your values change accordingly? But you won't be able to love fully anyone but your God, the personification of your values. Do you see? I mean, by definition, this is what you value. And love is intensely valuing. So it has to be your values. Now, your values do change as you experience the consistency or otherwise with your values and what happens to you and the consequent effect on your life, whether it makes you, whether it's found to be acceptable, the outcomes or not. So yes, we love even our enemies, but we don't fall in love with them. In fact, if you think of it, you can fall in love with someone else, but only by really ascribing to them all that you value. And of course you find after a few months or a few years, possibly 3 to 5 years, that they are not all that you have ascribed to them. They have their own individuality. And now you're faced with a dilemma. I need a harmony with the person I'm with. You're committed to them. Possibly formally, by some ceremony and by some, you're betrothed, married and so on. But possibly not by anything formal at all, but simply you've been good for each other. You value each other, even though you're beginning to realize you're not the same as each other. Well, of course, you thought that he or she was wonderful to begin with when you fell in love. And you're very attached to that. And loyal to, in that you want their welfare, even though clearly they are not entirely what you value. Now here comes an astonishing quality. You become loyal to, despite the difference. You seek a harmony, despite the difference. You are training for the kingdom of heaven. Wow. Now, of course, many of us don't do too well. Our track record is not continuously upward. We're not loyal. And the breakup can be very sad, very upsetting, leaving you quite shattered, desperate, dismembered. Even if you initiate it, perhaps especially if you initiate it. I'm not sure. You may not have divorced someone, but you may well have broken off relationships with friends and so forth, and relatives. And even if you've done the breach, you're the one that's left the relationship, cut it off. You can still find it very upsetting. It's just that presumably continuing the relationship seems more upsetting to you. It's here, I think, that we're truly being trained in what our values are. When we see the consequence of disloyalty, we can be appalled, and our values greatly shift into the importance of loyalty, even though there are differences between individuals. In other words, we're training without realizing it to become eligible for entry to heaven. But how could you go to heaven if you're going to wreck the joint? They're not going to all be the same up there. If you like, I say up there, but you know what I mean. You have to have mastered harmony in diversity. Bless you. Thank you, Dad. Well, we started this recording considering, the modern sort of trend to increase your self-confidence and, well, your ego, your external persona. But that's not the true purpose of your being. And it won't be fulfilling. For what you're really needing is to develop who you truly are at heart. To live your values, experience the consequence, and find you're adjusting accordingly. You need to devote yourself to love, in fact, the personification of your values as your God, seen in the Jesus understanding teaching as your dad, the one that's giving birth to who you're becoming. Your Heavenly Father. That one is easy to love because they're the personification of your values that you do value. And you live accordingly, enthusiastically now if you're so devoted. Where you can, I don't mean you disobey your society. You'll be pretty desperate without society, so I mean that would be futile. But where you are free, if you like to be your true self, good. You know, where you are free and it's not illegal or whatever, not against imposed custom. And that range of freedom might vary a great deal from one society to another. I suspect you would be able to be more fulfilled if you can find a society that allows you a lot of freedom compared to very little. But you are to some extent where you find yourself, and that's where your experience is. I see that we have a concept of freedom here. Freedom to be your true self. This, as we've said, just here, may be constrained somewhat by that imposed on by those around you, imposed on you by those around you. But you value the freedom to live according to your values. Which we probably do most effectively when we visualize our God as having these values, your true values, and loving him with all your heart, soul, mind and strength, all that you are, all your resources. Where you're able, where your society allows you the freedom to do so. In other words, within requirements imposed upon you. Avoid those impositions if you can. If you can't, well, don't deny them, because the consequences may be very detrimental. As we know, dictators, for instance, love to dictate. Interestingly, let me pick up on Paul, who says, love, joy, peace, patience, forbearance. I've seen Corinthians there. The whole list is there. Against such there is no law. I think I'd like to put in brackets in general, but there does seem to be some restrictions on it sometimes. But you take the point. Most of what you truly value may be quite open to you to follow and practice. Thank goodness. Thank you, God. Thank you, Dad. So do that with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. If you like, quite simply, that's by far your best option. Taste and see. I would say the obvious that I'm going to say you would expect, which is, for instance, whatsoever is good and lovely, think on these things. And see the effect it has on you. You blossom into thankfulness, joy, hope, peace follows quickly on the heels of becoming aware of everything that's good around you. You can do that. And as far as I know, that will do you more good than anything else. Especially that is if it's in the context of thanking your God as your dad, as your loving dad, for providing such at heart. If you do that, well, my goodness, what sort of society you're in may be of much less importance as regards its constraint on you than you thought. You will find you accelerate, if you like, in spirituality at an ever-increasing rate. Quite simply, you find you are part of the heavenly host.